They're just constantly on us. TV, radio, the mail, on our phones, texting. Hey, Bill, Tim Walz here. You up? They're everywhere all the time. Jesus Christ, off. Let mommy put her purse down. What I could see is replacing the vice president because, yeah, she's just not very popular anywhere. And it didn't seem to work out. And I don't know, that's been done before on a ticket. I just think she's a bad politician.
The Democrats are scrambling to find anyone capable of rescuing their flailing re-election hopes, and guess who's suddenly being floated again? Kamala Harris, because nothing screams bold new leadership like dusting off the most uninspiring vice president in recent memory. Enter Bill Maher, who's never exactly been on Team Kamala, and he's not softening with time. In a scathing monologue, Maher didn't just pour cold water on the Kamala 2024 dream, he drenched it in gasoline and set it ablaze, so buckle up. Grab the popcorn and maybe keep a fire extinguisher handy. Interview.
When Joe Biden was still hanging on to be the candidate, many of the pundits said that to switch him out this late would cause chaos. Yeah, that was never my position. And indeed, what happened was Kamala Harris said, "Oh, look, I guess it's my turn." And the next day, a grateful nation handed her $500 million. The only reason we stay stuck in permanent campaign mode is money. It's estimated this year that $16 billion will be spent on political ads. It's time we admit that the endless campaign exists only to enrich advertisers, political consultants, and what's left of the news media.
Maher launched into his tirade by pointing out the obvious, that it took Joe Biden years, not weeks or months, to finally admit what was plain to anyone paying attention: he no longer had the mental acuity to run for re-election. Those of us who dared to speak that truth early were dismissed, silenced, or buried under a mountain of smug fact checks. But the moment Biden imploded during the presidential debate, our conspiracy theories instantly morphed into mainstream common sense. So how did the Democrats respond? By backing a bold new leader. Not a chance. They handed the reins to Kamala Harris, a vice president so absent from public view you'd think she was in witness protection. She cruised in unopposed, unchallenged. And where did that get them? Straight into one of the most humiliating electoral disasters in U.S. history. Interview.
People didn't used to get sick of the candidates because you barely ever saw them unless you happened to be standing at the back end of a train. But now we never stop seeing them. The winner in modern elections comes down to who we're less tired of. They're just constantly on us. TV, radio, the mail, on our phones, texting. Hey, Bill, Tim Walz here. You up? They're everywhere all the time. Jesus Christ, off. Let mommy put her purse down.
One of the tamer reasons Maher thinks Kamala Harris helped sink the election: voter fatigue. Pure and simple people were beyond done with seeing her face plastered everywhere, not in a commanding presidential sense, but in a nonstop cringy PR blitz that felt more like spam than leadership. Alongside Tim Walz, she became an omnipresent duo, ambushing your inbox, hijacking your concerts, photobombing your Instagram, crashing your YouTube ads, and worming into your TikTok scroll like an unwanted pop-up. It was marketing overkill, a saturation campaign that didn't build trust, it drained it. Instead of sparking enthusiasm, it sparked a collective eye roll. Personally, it felt like being cornered by a brand I'd never buy, selling a product I never wanted, a wildly unpopular VP with no vision, and even less authenticity. The whole thing didn't connect, it repelled. And as Maher so sharply put it, this wasn't just overexposure, it was political self-sabotage in 4K. Interview.
What I could see is replacing the vice president because, yeah, she's just not very popular anywhere. And it didn't seem to work out. And I don't know, that's been done before on a ticket. I just think she's a bad politician.
Another reason Maher sees Kamala Harris as a doomed candidate: she's just not a good politician, and not in the lovable outsider way, but in the painfully unpolished, unprepared way. Maher could rattle off a laundry list of her missteps, but one glaring issue stands Above the rest, her complete inability to navigate unscripted moments the second she's faced with a question outside her carefully memorized talking points. It's like watching a deer freeze in the headlights, if that deer's teleprompter also glitched mid-sentence. We've all seen it, the now iconic word salads, those long, meandering, disjointed monologues that manage to say absolutely nothing while dragging on for what feels like forever. Interview.
You need to get to go. I need to be able to get where you need to go.
I do believe that we should have rightly believed, but we certainly believe that certain issues are just settled. And that's why I do believe that we are living in real unsettled times.
Even the scripted interviews are hard to sit through. Kamala Harris stumbles, backtracks, and often leaves voters scratching their heads instead of feeling informed. For someone with years in public office, her delivery remains oddly unrefined, lacking the polish and poise you'd expect at that level in politics. Clarity and confidence are everything, and Kamala keeps showing up empty-handed. Ma isn't being harsh, he's pointing out what's painfully obvious. Need a reminder? Just rewind to the time she proudly named North Korea as one of our allies. Interview.
The United States shares a very important relationship, which is an alliance with the Republic of North Korea. In the North, we see a brutal dictatorship, rampant human rights violations, and an unlawful weapons program.
I mean, seriously, how does someone accidentally call North Korea an ally? That's not just a harmless slip, it's a full-blown geopolitical faceplant. And maybe, just maybe, we could laugh it off if it came from anyone else. But this is Kamala Harris, the same woman who's practically turned verbal blunders into a signature style. She's not just prone to gaffes, she's their reigning monarch. Now imagine her as president, sitting in a high-stakes closed-door meeting with NATO, the G7, or negotiating with China or Russia, and out comes another baffling, poorly timed comment. The room would freeze, translators would scramble, and global markets might actually flinch. These aren't cute flubs, they're loaded mistakes with real-world consequences. When the role demands laser-sharp clarity and international finesse, the last thing we need is a leader who can't stop stepping on her own message. Ma wasn't just making a point, he was delivering a warning. Interview.
This is Kamala's great dilemma. Trump is invulnerable to an October surprise, but she is very vulnerable because she's the one who is still undefined. And as she showed in this week's Bret Baier interview, her go-to when attacked for her own actions is usually Trump is worse. Okay, we know that. But now undecided voters want to hear about you. They want someone to vote for. This election comes down to this. Trump has a coalition of voters made up of A, people who really do like him, and B, people who think with all of his flaws, he's still better than far-left insanity.
Kamala Harris was so weak on the campaign trail that anytime she got pressed, she defaulted to the same worn outline. While Trump was worse, as if simply not being Trump is some kind of resume for the presidency. It wasn't a vision, it wasn't leadership, it was the political version of saying, hey, at least I'm not the other guy. And that's not a campaign strategy, it's a lazy excuse. According to Bill Maher, one of the real tests of Harris's leadership was whether she could stand up to the increasingly unhinged demands of the woke echo chamber. Would she think for herself or bow to the loudest voices? Spoiler, she caved repeatedly. Every time the moment called for backbone, Harris folded like a lawn chair. Rather than lead with principle, she paired whatever hashtag was hot that week for Ma, and for plenty of voters looking for authenticity. That wasn't just a red flag, it was confirmation that she wasn't ready to lead a fractured nation desperate for direction, not blind conformity. Interview.
And the voters' big doubt about Kamala is, are you part of far-left insanity? The attack ad I see 10 times a day, and a question Bret Baier aimed at her on Wednesday, was about her saying in 2019 that she supported providing taxpayer-funded exchange operations to illegal immigrants in prison. Something that's actually never happened and has no real bearing on anybody's life. But it's a litmus test for voters out there who want to know of the Democrat, is there anything your fringe can suggest that will ever make you say, no, that's ridiculous?
Politics under President Biden. The nation had one pressing question: would Kamala Harris stay the course or take it even further? Sadly, she offered no clarity, no vision. And certainly no signal that she'd hit the brakes. If anything, her silence, or worse, her clear complicity, suggested she was ready to double down on the same divisive performative policies that had already driven a wedge through the electorate at a moment when Americans were crying out for strength, sanity, and a return to common sense. Harris delivered only vagueness wrapped in activist catchphrases, so when it came time to vote, the public turned to the one figure who actually addressed that growing hunger for restoration. President Trump, like him or loathe him, he offered what Harris couldn't: hope for economic revival, secure borders, energy independence, and the kind of bold, unapologetic leadership that doesn't fold under pressure for millions. Trump wasn't just a choice, he was the correction. Interview.
Next time, maybe try. Joe Biden generally did a good job, but sure, I wish we'd tightened the border sooner, as we have done now, and trust me, I learned my lesson, and that's never going to happen again. Kamala, it's so important that you win this election, not just for the sake of retaining a real democracy and for the good of the world, but also because I predicted a month ago you'd win this thing, and if you blow it, it's going to make me look bad.
Yeah. Another glaring reason Maher argues Kamala Harris is unfit for the presidency: just look at her disastrous performance. As borders are, it was one of her most prominent assignments, and she utterly fumbled it under her so-called oversight. The southern border didn't just leak, it collapsed. Millions of illegal immigrants surged into the country, bringing with them chaos, strained resources, and growing national security threats. But it wasn't just about the numbers. As Ma and others pointed out, this wasn't simply families searching for a better life. The border turned into a full-blown superhighway for trafficking human drug and arms. Fentanyl flooded American communities, overdose deaths soared, and illegal weapons flowed into criminal hands while law enforcement struggled to keep up. And where was Harris? Nowhere to be found, offering hollow sound bites while ducking the crisis she was tasked to solve. If this was her leadership audition, she didn't just flunk, she ghosted. Interview.
I've got a really good prediction record, so please don't f this up. Kamala, ever since I put down my marker on you and said you'd win and I wasn't even worried about it, everyone, everywhere, on the road, in L.A., texting me, emailing me, stopping me in restaurants, asking me, Bill, are you sure? No, I'm not sure. What am I, Kreskin? I'm not sure, but that's my gut. I think Kamala Harris wants this. I think she can do this, to say nothing of, if she loses, she'll never hear the end of it from Joe. I told you I was the only one who could beat him, Biden.
Maher's prediction didn't stop the inevitable, but it was dead on. Kamala Harris lost the election, and not in a nail-biter. Voters rejected her by a wide margin, yet even in defeat, everything Ma warned about still holds water. Kamala hasn't grown, adjusted, or even pretended to shift course. If anything, she's leaning harder into the very flaws that made her unelectable. Case in point, she recently spoke at a major real estate conference, a prime chance to offer real solutions and show some actual leadership. Instead, she delivered yet another trademark word salad, rambling, murky, and painfully devoid of substance. The audience was left dazed, wondering if she said anything at all. No clarity, no content, just more polished confusion. If Harris truly sees herself as a future contender, she might want to start with mastering coherent speech. Until then, Maher's takedown isn't just relevant, it's a brutally honest reminder of why she flopped. And that wraps up today's video. If you liked it, hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching. See you next time.